He was never supposed to be born. Not like this. The most famous king in British legend began with a deception so complete, even his mother did not know the truth. A stolen face, a murdered husband, and a bargain with Merlin, whose true purpose would not become clear for years. Because before Arthur pulled the sword from the stone, before the round table, before Camelot, Merlin was already watching, waiting, and moving pieces no one else could see. Everything you are about to hear comes from medieval accounts of Arthur. Stories written centuries ago by men trying to preserve Britain's past. History, legend, perhaps something between the two. The sources disagree on many things, but together they leave behind a question that has survived for centuries. Did Arthur become king because he was destined to, or because someone made sure he would? This is where the mystery begins. Britain, a land divided, kings, warlords, rival lords fighting for control of a country no ruler could completely hold. And in the medieval story, one man was trying to hold it together. Uther Pendragon, a warrior, a king, and a man whose throne was never as secure as he wanted it to be. Among the strongest rulers in Britain was Gorlois, Duke of Cornwall. For a time, Gorlois stood beside Uther. They fought on the same side, shared enemies, sat at the same table. Then Uther saw Gorlois' wife. Her name was Igraine. According to Geoffrey of Monmouth's account, Uther became consumed by her, so consumed that eventually he stopped hiding it. At a royal feast, in front of his court, in front of Igraine, and in front of her husband, Uther gave her so much unwanted attention that Gorlois stood up, took his wife, and left. He did not wait for mourning. He did not ask the king's permission. He left the court and returned to Cornwall. Uther ordered him back. Gorlois refused. And a king who could not possess what he wanted now had the excuse he needed to start a war. Gorlois knew he could not defend everything, so he divided his forces. Igraine was sent to Tintagel, a fortress built against the sea, protected by cliffs and connected to the mainland by a narrow approach that only a handful of soldiers could defend. Gorlois took his remaining men to another stronghold. If Uther wanted him, he would have to follow. And Uther did. His army surrounded Gorlois' fortress. The siege began. But while soldiers prepared for battle, Uther was thinking about Tintagel, about the woman hidden behind its walls, about a fortress his army could not easily reach. According to Geoffrey, Uther became physically ill from desire. And eventually, the king turned to the one man who might give him what no army could, Merlin. By the time Arthur's story was written down, Merlin was unlike anyone else in British legend. Prophet, advisor, magician, a man who seemed to understand events before anyone else knew they mattered. Uther told Merlin what he wanted. He wanted to enter Tintagel. He wanted Igraine. And he wanted Merlin to make it possible. The request was simple and completely without honor. Make me look like Gorlois. Give me his face, his appearance, everything Igraine would recognize without question. Let me enter Tintagel as her husband. Merlin agreed. But in later versions of Arthur's story, his help came with a condition. If a child came from that night, the child would be given to Merlin. Uther agreed. No hesitation, no bargaining. He wanted what waited behind the walls of Tintagel. Whatever happened afterward could be faced later. Under Merlin's magic, Uther changed. His face became Gorlois' face. His appearance became Gorlois' appearance. Two of Uther's companions were transformed as well. Made to resemble men Gorlois trusted. Then, under cover of darkness, they approached Tintagel. The guards saw their lord returning home. Why would they stop him? The gates opened, and Uther walked inside. Igraine saw her husband, or at least she believed she did. She had no reason to think otherwise. No reason to know that the man standing before her was the king who had started a war over her. And according to Geoffrey of Monmouth's account, Arthur was conceived that night. But miles away, something else had happened. While Uther wore Gorlois' face, the real Gorlois rode into battle. His attack failed, and Gorlois was killed. Think about what the story is asking us to imagine. For one night, there were two Gorloises, one dying in battle, the other walking through Tintagel, wearing his face. One man losing his life, another man taking his place, and between them, a child was conceived, who would become the most famous king Britain never forgot. News of Gorlois' death reached Tintagel, and the story Igraine had been given no longer made sense. The man she believed had visited her that night had been killed somewhere else. But Gorlois was gone. The truth was known by only a handful of people. Soon afterward, Uther married Igraine. To the outside world, it could almost look respectable. A king marrying the widow of a fallen duke. But Igraine was already carrying Arthur, a child conceived through a deception she had never agreed to. Months later, Arthur was born. Uther had gotten everything he wanted. And now, Merlin came for the one thing Uther had promised away. The medieval accounts do not tell Arthur's story exactly the same way. Geoffrey of Monmouth preserved the story of Arthur's conception. Centuries later, Thomas Malory preserved the version of Arthur's childhood and the sword that most people recognize today. And in Malory's story, before Arthur was born, Merlin reminded Uther of his promise: the child must be surrendered. When Arthur was born, he was taken away, not raised in a palace, not announced as the king's son, not surrounded by guards or servants. Arthur was given to Sir Ector, a loyal knight who raised the child as his own. Arthur grew up without knowing his mother, without knowing his father, without knowing who he was. A king's son would have had enemies, rivals who would kill a child to prevent the man he might become. But the story never fully explains why Merlin needed Arthur hidden from everyone, including Arthur himself. Years passed. Arthur grew up beside Sir Ector's son, Kay. He trained with him, served him, eventually became his squire. No palace, no crown, no prophecy. Arthur grew up, ordinary. Then Uther Pendragon died, and after years of silence, Merlin returned. Without a king the realm would accept, Britain began to fracture. Powerful lords wanted the throne. Each believed his bloodline stronger, his army larger, his claim greater. Then Merlin went to the Archbishop of Canterbury. He told him to summon the greatest lords and knights of the realm to London. They were to gather at Christmas. They were to pray for a sign, a way for God to reveal Britain's rightful king. And on Christmas morning, the sign appeared. In the churchyard stood something that had not been there before, a great stone. On top of the stone, an anvil, and driven through the anvil was a sword. Written around it were words every lord in Britain understood. Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is right-wise king born of all England. The greatest men in the realm tried, kings, lords, knights, men who had spent their entire lives fighting. One after another, they wrapped their hands around the sword, pulled, strained, failed. The sword did not move, not an inch, and Merlin watched. Eventually, a tournament was held. Sir Ector attended, his son, Kay, and Kay's young squire, Arthur. Arthur did not arrive looking for a crown. He did not know he was Uther's son. He did not know Merlin had arranged his childhood. He did not know that Britain's greatest lords had failed to pull the sword from the stone. Arthur was there, because Kay needed him. On the morning of the tournament, Kay realized he had forgotten his sword. Arthur immediately rode back to retrieve it. But when he reached their lodging, the doors were locked. Everyone had gone to watch the tournament. Arthur could not get inside. His brother needed a sword, and Arthur did not want to return empty-handed. Then he remembered the churchyard, the sword, the one standing inside the stone and anvil. Arthur rode there. The churchyard was empty. The guards assigned to watch the sword had gone to see the tournament. Arthur saw the sword. He did not understand what it meant. He only knew that Kay needed a weapon. So Arthur walked toward the stone, wrapped his hand around the sword, and pulled. It came free. No struggle, no thunder, no army watching. The greatest men in Britain had failed, and a boy who wasn't trying to become king had just done the impossible. Arthur brought the sword to Kay. Kay recognized it immediately. He knew what Arthur had done, and for one moment, Kay claimed the sword and the throne for himself. But Sir Ector knew his son. Inside the church, he made Kay swear upon scripture that he had truly pulled the sword free. Kay broke. Arthur had given it to him. Sir Ector returned with Arthur to the churchyard. The sword was placed back. Kay tried. He failed. Sir Ector tried. He failed. Then Arthur stepped forward and pulled it free as easily as before. Sir Ector knelt. Arthur was horrified. He asked why the man he believed was his father was kneeling to him. And Sir Ector told him the truth. Arthur was not his son. The ordinary life Arthur believed he had lived was over. Arthur was king. But the question remained: the deception at Tintagel, the bargain, the hidden child, the gathering of the nobles, the sword. Merlin had been there for all of it. Watching. Waiting. Perhaps guiding events. Perhaps only seeing what no one else could. Whether he had foreseen Arthur's rise or helped create it, the stories never tell us. And maybe that is why the mystery has survived. Because Arthur's greatest story was only beginning. He would build a kingdom unlike anything Britain had seen. The Round Table, Excalibur, Lancelot, Guinevere, Camelot. A kingdom so extraordinary, people would spend centuries searching for the place where it stood. But every kingdom carries the beginning of its fall. And while Arthur was rising, someone else was waiting. A woman whose name had not yet entered Arthur's story, but it would. Her name was Nimue. Merlin had spent his life seeing what others could not. Kings before they rose, wars before they began, a hidden child before the world knew his name. But the stories leave us with one final mystery. Did Merlin see her coming? And if he did, why couldn't he stop her? But before Merlin disappeared, before Arthur's kingdom began to fracture, Camelot had to rise. And what happened next would turn a hidden boy into the king the world would never forget. Because Arthur had become king. Now, he had to build Camelot.